Burt Reynolds was born with the name Burton Leon Reynolds Jr. on February 11, 1936, in a small town called Lansing, Michigan. His mom's name was Harriet Furnett, and his dad was Burton Milo Reynolds, who worked as a police chief in their town. When Burt was still young, his whole family packed up and moved to a place called Riviera Beach in sunny Florida. It was there that young Burt fell in love with playing sports, especially football. He loved running, tackling, and everything about the game. Football became super important to him and shaped what he wanted to do with his life when he grew up. Burt went to Florida State University for college, and he was really, really good at football. He played as a halfback on the team, which is a pretty important position. Everyone thought he had a bright future ahead of him and might even become a professional football player one day. But then something terrible happened that changed everything. Burt got a really bad knee injury while playing. His knee got hurt so badly that his dreams of playing professional football were completely crushed and ruined. It was a sad and difficult moment in his life, but looking back, that injury actually pushed him toward a completely different path. It ended up changing his whole destiny and steering him toward becoming an actor instead of a football star. After his football dreams ended, Burt felt kind of lost and confused about what to do next. He went to junior college for a little while, and then he spent some years just wandering around without much direction or purpose in his life. He didn't really know what he wanted to be or where he was going. But then one day, a teacher noticed something special in him. This teacher encouraged Burt to try acting and performing on stage. That simple encouragement became like a tiny spark that lit a huge fire inside him. It set Burt Reynolds on the path that would eventually make him super famous. But becoming a star wasn't easy at all for Burt. His early acting career in the 1950s was really tough and full of struggles. He had to take tiny, small parts in television shows that not many people watched. He appeared on shows like Gunsmoke and Riverboat, playing characters that didn't have big roles. Burt had rugged, handsome looks and a deep, powerful voice that made him perfect for playing cowboys in westerns. But even with all that, it took a really long time for Hollywood directors and producers to see him as more than just another good-looking guy with a nice face. They didn't realize how talented he really was at first. His big breakout moment finally came in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He got roles in movies that really showed off his acting skills. One of his most important movies was called Deliverance, which came out in 1972. In that movie, Burt delivered a raw, powerful, and intense performance that made everyone realize he could really act. He wasn't just a pretty face. He had real depth and could show strong emotions. The movie was both a huge hit with movie critics who review films and with regular people who bought tickets to see it. This success made Burt Reynolds a serious performer who could do way more than just smile and look charming. The 1970s became the absolute best time of Burt Reynolds' career and stardom. He made hit after hit after hit. Movies like Smokey and the Bandit, which came out in 1977, The Longest Yard from 1974, and Hooper from 1978 made him one of the biggest movie stars in America. He became the perfect symbol of what American audiences thought a movie star should be: rebellious, confident, and full of good-natured masculinity. His trademark thick mustache, his devilish grin that made people smile, and his confident swagger defined a whole era of film heroes. These were heroes who didn't take themselves too seriously and could have fun. Audiences absolutely loved him because he seemed approachable and real, like someone they could actually be friends with. He was a man who could make you laugh really hard one minute and then break your heart and make you cry the next minute. But Burt Reynolds wasn't just about action movies and making people laugh with comedy. He also proved that he could do serious, dramatic acting too. His performance in Deliverance is still one of the most respected and admired performances of his entire career. People still talk about how good he was in that movie. Then later in his life, he made an amazing comeback with a role in a movie called Boogie Nights in 1997. In that film, he played a character named Jack Horner, who was a complicated and complex adult film director. The character showed a weird mix of being like a caring father figure but also having flawed morality and making bad choices. Burt's performance showed his mature, layered acting ability that had grown over the years. Many people and movie critics saw it as a career-defining moment, a role that proved once and for all that, beneath his rugged, playful, fun-loving exterior, there was an actor with real emotional substance and depth. But Burt Reynolds' journey wasn't all glamorous and perfect. He also had some really hard times with financial troubles and career missteps along the way. In the 1980s and 1990s, things got tough for him. He made some movies that flopped and didn't do well at the box office. He also had health problems that made things harder. On top of all that, he even went through bankruptcy, which means he lost most of his money and had serious financial problems. But even through all these difficulties, Burt remained resilient and strong. He kept bouncing back and returning again and again to the screen and stage. He always came back with humor and humility, never giving up. He continued acting well into his later years when he was much older, and he often spent time mentoring and teaching younger performers who were just starting out. He also appeared in small independent films that reminded audiences of his enduring magnetism and star power that never really went away. Burt Reynolds' personal life was often just as colorful, dramatic, and exciting as the roles and characters he played on screen. His marriages especially reflected the intense, passionate, and sometimes turbulent nature that defined so much of his private world away from the cameras. He was married twice in his life, and each marriage represented a different era and time period in his life and career. His first marriage was to an actress named Judy Carne during his early rise to fame when he was just starting to become well known. His second marriage was later to a television star named Loni Anderson, at the absolute height of his Hollywood stardom when he was at his most famous. Both marriages were short-lived and didn't last very long, but they left a lasting imprint on Reynolds' emotional journey and public image. People still remember both of these relationships. His first marriage was to Judy Carne, who was an English actress. She was best known for her funny, comedic performances on a popular 1960s sketch comedy show called Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. The two of them got married in 1963, which was when Reynolds was still establishing himself and trying to become a promising young actor and Hollywood heartthrob that women loved. Their relationship began with lots of passion and shared ambition. Both of them were attractive, energetic performers who were trying really hard to climb the ladder of fame and success. However, their marriage was plagued by tons of problems. The pressures of show business and their clashing personalities that didn't work well together caused lots of fights. Judy Carne later wrote very candidly and honestly in her memoir book about the volatility of their relationship. She described a strange mix of affection and love, mixed with emotional strain and stress, that ultimately proved too difficult to sustain and keep going. Reynolds, for his part, would later admit and confess that the marriage ended way too quickly. He said that he had not yet matured enough or grown up enough to handle the demands of a lifelong commitment to another person. After only 2 years together as husband and wife, the couple divorced in 1965. It was a brief but influential chapter in Reynolds' early life that affected him. Although their marriage ended in divorce, Reynolds reportedly maintained a sense of regret about how it all unfolded and went down. He later reflected and thought back that both he and Judy were simply too young and too career-driven and focused on work to make the marriage work properly. More than 2 decades later, that's over 20 years, Burt Reynolds entered into his second marriage. This time it was with Loni Anderson, a beautiful blonde bombshell and television star who had become a household name that everyone knew. She was famous for playing a character named Jennifer Marlowe on a TV show called WKRP in Cincinnati. They got married in 1988, at a time when Reynolds was one of Hollywood's most bankable leading men, which means studios knew his movies would make lots of money. Loni was also at the peak of her popularity and fame. Their union seemed like a glamorous Hollywood fairy tale come true. Two beautiful, successful stars joining their lives together in what appeared to everyone to be a perfect match made in heaven. The wedding itself was highly publicized all over the news and media. It drew the attention of tons of fans and the media alike, who saw them as one of Hollywood's golden couples, the perfect pair. However, behind all the public smiles and red carpet appearances where they looked happy, The marriage was actually far from harmonious and peaceful. Both Reynolds and Anderson were strong-willed individuals with demanding careers and really busy schedules that kept them apart a lot. Rumors of discord and fighting soon began to surface and spread. Financial disagreements about money, career pressures and stress, and allegations of infidelity on both sides, which means people said they both cheated on each other, reportedly strained the relationship and made it very tense. The marriage began to deteriorate and fall apart in the early 1990s. This led to a bitter and very public divorce in 1994 that everyone heard about. The breakup made national headlines in newspapers and on TV as Reynolds and Anderson both spoke openly and sometimes very harshly about each other in the press and media. They said mean things about each other in public. Reynolds later admitted that the divorce was one of the most painful experiences of his entire life, both emotionally in his heart and financially with his money. He accused Anderson of being more concerned with fame and money than with real love, while Anderson claimed that Reynolds had been unfaithful and cheated on her, and she also said he was abusive, which are claims he denied and said weren't true. Despite all the bitterness and anger, their relationship also included some tender moments and good times, particularly centered around their shared devotion to their adopted son, Quentin Anderson Reynolds, whom they both loved very much. Though the marriage ended really badly, both of them eventually expressed regret about how public and acrimonious their split had become. They both wished they hadn't fought so much in public where everyone could see. In his later years when he was older, Reynolds reflected and thought back on his marriage to Anderson with a mix of wistfulness and sorrow. He admitted that while the relationship had caused him deep pain and hurt, he had genuinely loved her for real and wished things could have turned out differently. He was sad about how it all ended. For decades, that's many years, fans of classic Hollywood westerns and tough guy cinema have drawn parallels and made comparisons between two of the most ruggedly handsome and charismatic actors of their generation. Those two actors were Burt Reynolds and Clint Walker. Both men embodied and represented the image of the stoic, muscular, heroic American male. They were the kind of guys who could tame a wild horse, win a bar fight, and still flash a disarming smile that melted hearts and made people swoon. Although their careers overlapped during the 1950s through the 1970s when they were both working, Reynolds had rarely spoken publicly about his personal feelings toward Walker. He almost never talked about Clint in interviews or to reporters. That silence and lack of talking left room for rumors and speculation until now. People wondered what Burt really thought about Clint. In a reflective interview that was recorded late in his life when he was much older, Burt Reynolds finally opened up and started talking about his friendship, rivalry, and admiration for Clint Walker. His words painted a vivid and clear picture of two Hollywood icons who were shaped by grit, talent, and an unspoken mutual respect for each other. It was like they understood each other without having to say much. "In my early days," Reynolds began, "Clint Walker was already a legend to guys like me. I was still trying really hard to make a name for myself and become known. And there was Clint, this absolute mountain of a man with a voice that sounded like it came straight from the Rocky Mountains. I remember watching him on a TV show called Cheyenne and thinking to myself, now that's what a real cowboy is supposed to look like." He was perfect. Reynolds admitted and confessed that seeing Walker dominate television in the 1950s made a really strong impression on him that he never forgot. While Burt was hustling and working super hard through guest roles and small parts that didn't pay much, Clint had already become one of Warner Brothers' biggest TV stars. He was 6'6" tall, built like a tank, super muscular and strong, and every studio in Hollywood wanted a piece of him, Reynolds said. "I'll be honest with you, I envied him a little bit back then. I was a little jealous. He had what we all wanted: strength, dignity, and this quiet confidence that didn't need to shout or brag. He just had it naturally." As Reynolds reflected further and thought more deeply, his tone softened and became gentler, revealing a deep sense of respect that had grown over time. Clint wasn't just muscle and charm and good looks. He was one of the kindest men I ever met in this crazy business. Hollywood can chew you up and spit you out like you're nothing, but Clint never lost his decency and goodness. He didn't play the game the way others did, being fake and political. He stayed true to himself no matter what, and that's something I always admired about him. Reynolds, who was known for his rebellious streak and occasional clashes with Hollywood executives when he didn't agree with them, recognized a shared independence in Walker. He saw that they were similar in some ways. We both had that stubborn streak where we didn't like being pushed around. We didn't like being told what to do by bosses. But Clint had a calm about him that I didn't have. Where I might blow up and get angry or joke my way through a bad situation, Clint would just look you straight in the eye and say what needed to be said. No games. That's real power. The quiet kind that doesn't need to be loud. When asked if the two of them ever considered working together on a movie or TV show, Reynolds chuckled and laughed. "There were a few times the idea came up and we talked about it," he said. "We joked about doing a Western together. He'd be the straight-arrow hero who always does the right thing, and I'd be the smart-mouthed deputy who gets in trouble all the time. It would have been a riot and so much fun, but the timing was never right. Schedules never worked out. I was always shooting something like Smokey and the Bandit while he was off doing another adventure picture somewhere else. Still, I think audiences would have absolutely loved to see us side by side on screen together. It would have been something special." Burt also addressed and talked about the long-standing fan debate that went on for years about who was the real toughest man in Hollywood. "People love to compare us," Reynolds said with a big grin on his face. "They'd say things like, 'Who'd win in a fight, Burt Reynolds or Clint Walker?' Well, I'll tell you the honest truth. If Clint wanted to, he could have snapped me like a twig, just broken me in half. But he wouldn't ever do that. That wasn't who he was as a person. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone or show off. His presence alone said it all. You just looked at him and knew." Reynolds went on to recall and remember the few times they crossed paths socially at events. "We met a handful of times over the years, not a lot, but a few times. Award shows, charity events, things like that where celebrities gather. Every single time I saw him, he greeted me like an old friend, not like competition. No ego. No trying to one-up each other, just genuine warmth and kindness. You don't forget that in this business where people can be so fake. He'd ask me how I was doing, how my folks were, how my family was, and he actually meant it. He really cared. You don't get that kind of sincerity from many people in Hollywood. Most people are just pretending." In his final reflections, Reynolds spoke not only as a fellow actor, but as a man looking back on what defined a whole generation of stars and what they represented. "Guys like Clint Walker represented something that's missing now in today's Hollywood," he said quietly and thoughtfully. "He was a man's man, but also a complete gentleman at the same time. He didn't need scandals or headlines to stay famous. He let his work and his characters speak for him. That's rare and special. I think we all wanted to be a little like Clint, strong, decent, and unshakable. He was someone to look up to." Reynolds concluded and finished his remarks with a simple, heartfelt tribute from the heart. Clint Walker was one of a kind, completely unique. The screen lost a real cowboy when he left us and passed away, and the world lost a genuinely good man. I was proud to know him, even just a little bit. And if there's a heaven up there, I like to think he's up there right now riding tall in the saddle on a horse, just like he always did in the movies. The truth is, I admired him way more than I ever said out loud. Maybe it's time people knew that and heard how I really felt. Burt Reynolds died of a heart attack at the Jupiter Medical Center in Jupiter, Florida on September 6, 2018. He was 82 years old when he passed away. His passing marked the end of an era in Hollywood. The loss of a man who had defined a whole generation of American masculinity with his charm, humor, and rugged good looks that everyone recognized. In the weeks leading up to his death, those people who were close to him noted and mentioned that he had continued to struggle with various health issues that had plagued and bothered him for years. This included heart problems that had forced him to undergo bypass surgery all the way back in 2010 to fix his heart. Despite his declining health and getting sicker, Reynolds had remained optimistic and positive. He was still talking about upcoming projects he wanted to do and expressing his love for acting. It was a passion that had never waned or gone away even after 6 decades. That's 60 years in the entertainment industry. When the heart attack struck and happened, it came as a huge shock to fans around the world. Many of them had grown up watching him in classic movies like Smokey and the Bandit, Deliverance, and Boogie Nights. He passed away quietly in the Florida town he had called home for years, a place he cherished and loved for its calm atmosphere, beautiful sunshine, and distance from the bustle and craziness of Hollywood. Reynolds's funeral arrangements were handled with dignity and discretion, done carefully and respectfully. He had requested privacy in death, much as he had sought serenity and peace in his later years. He didn't want a big public spectacle. His ex-wife, actress Loni Anderson, and their adopted son, Quentin Reynolds, took charge of organizing a private memorial service to honor him. Despite the turbulence and chaos that had once characterized Burt and Loni's marriage when they fought all the time, Anderson put aside the past and old grudges to ensure that Reynolds received a farewell worthy of his legacy and all he had accomplished. Their relationship had been the subject of intense tabloid attention during the 1980s and early 1990s, when reporters wrote about them constantly. But by the time of his death, both of them had found peace and mutual respect for each other. The anger was gone. Anderson reportedly wanted the ceremony to reflect Reynolds' spirit and personality. Simple, heartfelt, and intimate rather than an extravagant Hollywood production with cameras and crowds everywhere. The private memorial service took place on September 20, 2018, at a funeral home in North Palm Beach, Florida. It was attended by close friends, family members, and a few colleagues from his film and television days who had worked with him over the years. Those people who were present at the service spoke of the actor's kindness, his mischievous sense of humor that always made people laugh, and his deep loyalty to the people he cared about. He never forgot his friends. It was a quiet gathering filled with tears and sadness, but also laughter as they shared happy memories of the man who had lit up the screen with his infectious charisma and energy that drew people in. Quentin, who had always maintained a private life away from the public spotlight and didn't seek fame, spoke tenderly and lovingly about his father. He described him as a man who, despite his fame and being super famous, was humble, loving, and always made time for family no matter how busy he was. Anderson was said to have been deeply emotional throughout the entire service, crying and feeling the loss. Yet she was strong in her resolve and determination to honor the memory of the man she had once loved with all her heart.